adopt the behaviors of the middle class that are unwritten. Okay, and with white migrants from the South, from a poverty-stricken area of the South, would have equally needed these helpful hints. So again, I don't think it's prejudicial or condescending. I think it's just pragmatic, again, because this is an opportunity to transition the middle class. And I think they're facilitating that with these helpful hints.
We'll take one more.
Okay, I think we all need to realize that people of the South were trying to escape segregation. They were leaving from one type of segregation, going to a whole different type of segregation than what they had seen before. In the South, it was more overt. You could see it. You could live next to me, but you couldn't have the same job that I have. It's okay if your land and my land are side by side. In the North, the type of segregation was more, I would say, covert, because we might work in the same job, but whenever I go home, you go to your neighborhood and I go to my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we're going to do things to keep our neighborhoods separate, like the situation on the train. Yeah, you there, but you're not there. It wasn't written that I had to put you in my work. You can sit next to me, but I don't have to hold conversation with you. So it was still a type of, we were still intermingling side by side, but when I went home, I looked across the street. It was a person of my color across the street from me. It wasn't a person of your color, a person that I felt like was lower than me living in that same neighborhood, and we would set the prices in my neighborhood so that you could move into my safe haven. That's why we have these roads or neighborhoods where you got all black people and all white people. And those are some of the same problems that we're still facing in this country today. Just
So that's a great segue actually to the next series of images that I want to show you, which is some artwork by Jacob Lawrence. And I think he's going to really get at exactly what you're talking about what life in the North really was like. So Jacob Lawrence is among the most famous African-American painters. He was only in his 20s when he produced the Migration series, which made him nationally famous. And I want to show you a few panels. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of slide through these and let you guys take a look. Can everybody see? Am I in the way? I'm in the way. I'll bend down and let's just take a look, and then we'll talk a little bit about these images and some of the text as well. So here we get the idea of, as you were talking about, the overcrowding, the dilapidated tenement houses, the kitchenettes that we saw, discrimination in the North being different than what it was in the South. This conflict, this class conflict that we've been talking about between the old settlers and the new settlers. The importance of the church, better educational facilities, the movement, the momentum of the migration. Okay. So what do you make of these panels? And I know I went through them pretty quickly, but what do you make of sort of the text and the color scheme? I mean, why do you think Jacob Lawrence decided to use these kinds of colors? And what kind of story about the migration do we get? And again, I know I'm only giving you just a few samples of this much longer series, but what do we get from these images? Faceless. Why do you think he did that? Why do you think he chose to depict African American migrants in this way?
You mean faces?
Mm-hmm.
Probably because it wasn't an individual movement. It was a whole group of people. It was a people's movement from the south to the north.
They're discovering their identities as well, their new identity as they moved, as they migrated.
Mm-hmm. 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 What do you make of the text? way, the kind of juxtaposition of the text and the artwork. What kind of feeling does this give you about the migration? Particularly if we think about it in comparison to some of the other images that we've looked at.
Well, to me, it's almost like you're going into uncertainty.
Yeah.
You know, it's a movement, you're moving, but you're moving into a world that's not your own.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that type of feeling. You know, when I look at, you know, the people, and I wonder about, you know, as they were moving from the south to the north, what kinds of things were going through their minds.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts about that, about what you feel as you look at these images and read this text?
I think it expresses hope,
Okay,
hope for the future.
yeah. Does it seem to kind of get at what you were saying though about offering a kind of balanced view of the North and a kind of more kind of realistic sense of both the possibilities and some of the problems? Okay, great. Okay, well, how are we doing on time? We're okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk now about some of the institutions that migrants created, and again, talk, kind of develop more about life in Chicago and what the migration meant and how the migration shaped Black life in Chicago. So as the Jacob Lawrence, one of the images Jacob Lawrence showed us, we see the ways that migrants created churches of every denomination. And many migrants, especially those from the South, from the rural South, were accustomed to services accompanied by improvisational singing or what was known as shouting and other forms of active participation. And worship was one way that migrants could adjust to the urban north while still retaining aspects of one's Southern cultural heritage. Now, upper class Blacks who considered themselves refined joined Episcopalian, Presbyterian, or Congregationalist churches. And the church in Chicago's Black community really reflected this fragmentation between the old settlers and the new migrants. So whether one worshiped at a middle class Black church or at a storefront Baptist or spiritualist church, served as an index to one's social and economic status. In Chicago, migrants attended the annual Bud Billiken Parade and also cheered at the predominantly Black Wendell Phillips High School football games. And migrants also enjoyed going to movies and taking part in the city's active and lively nightlife. In Chicago, African Americans established the first Black-owned and operated hospital in America at a time when few public or private medical facilities were open to Blacks. And I should also mention that if we take a look at the south side of Chicago, the Black Belt, in 1910, 78% of Black Chicagoans lived on the south side in a narrow strip of land known as the Black Belt. It began at the edge of an industrial warehouse district just south of the Loop, which is Chicago's central business district, and then stretched southward along State Street for more than 30 blocks. And it was interesting because I was talking to my father about this, who grew up in Chicago, and I showed him this, and he said, oh no, he said, my world was really limited. So he felt like this was actually even greater than what his world was, which was even tighter, even smaller than what we see here. But here, this sense of a vibrant human community in space, an array of public institutions, the Black Press, the Wabash Avenue YMCA, Provident Hospital, along with a very professional and merchant class, all evoked a strong sense of functionality in the central black district of a neighborhood that was known as Bronzeville. And this neighborhood and all of its institutions and centers of black life made Bronzeville what sociologists St. Clair Drake and Horace Caton, authors of the landmark work Black Metropolis, which was published in 1945, a city within a city. That's what it was called. And central to the development of this city within a city was the emergence of an economic and political base in the black community. So because the Black Belt was so physically constrained, and because this physical constrainment coincided with widening racial discrimination in Chicago,